At number 10, we have Jacob Hoggard. Jacob from Headley was recently just sentenced for 5 years for grievous bodily harm against a woman from Ottawa, Ontario. Back in 2016, Toronto police arrested the star and confirmed the SC unit had launched an investigation against the pop star. In a report done by the crime unit, it said Jacob will commit a number of different crimes towards the female in a Toronto hotel room, and another Toronto woman would also come forward to say the same thing happened to her. In addition to the two unnamed women, Taylor Bowman, a former Headley fan, said she was touched inappropriately by the star outside of a bar in Manitoba back in 2015. Since Taylor has gone public with her story, she says about 60 more women have also reached out to her explaining that they went through the same experience. Jacob will now be added to an offender registry list and is not to have any contact with his victims anymore. At number 9, we have Felicity Huffman. Now, Felicity Huffman pleaded guilty to paying a college admission consultant $15,000 to have her daughter's answers changed after she took the SAT test, so that her daughter could get into a prestigious university. Huffman had to serve 11 days out of her 14-day sentence. Felicity is among 15 parents who pleaded guilty to the scheme, which resulted in dozens of parents being accused of paying bribes to cheat on college entrance exams to get their children into elite schools as fake athletic recruits. With many of these parents being celebrities, there's been a lot of outrage from people, especially from the students who worked really hard to get into these schools. We teach our kids that cheating is wrong, but when money is involved, it's suddenly okay. Now, a lot of the students who had parents involved in this scandal have stated they had no idea that their parents were doing this. However, they had to know when they were taking photos for the sports teams that they didn't know how to play the sport. So what do you think about this incident? And let me know in the comments below. At number 8, we have Mark Wahlberg. Now, Mark Wahlberg spent 45 days in prison because he assaulted a Vietnamese shopkeeper and used racial slurs against him back in 1988. In the incident, it is said that Mark was under the influence of a powerful substance, and during his sentence, the actor took the time to reflect on the issue by saying he's always been in trouble and that he's always been a little a-hole growing up, especially in circumstances where he felt like he was being preyed upon. Being only 16 years old when the accident occurred, the actor also noted it wasn't an easy thing navigating through life as a 5'2", 120-pound teenager and having to protect yourself from grown men. Mark said that being in jail definitely changed his perspective of life and it pushed him to do better. While violence is never the answer, but at least he was able to own up to his actions, reflect on his past, and it helped him grow into the man he is today. Are you liking this video so far? If so, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel.
Up next, number 7 is Joseph's son. He gained celebrity status after playing random task in the first Austin Powers movie, but lost everything when he was sentenced to prison for assaulting and torturing a woman. The crime actually happened in 1990, but he didn't get arrested and charged until 2011, which means he filmed the Austin Powers movie after committing the crime and nobody even knew. How twisted is that? DNA evidence finally linked him to the case all those years later. If that was not bad enough, just a few years ago in 2017, he was sentenced to 27 years for killing his cellmate. Court documents say that his cellmate was a man named Michael Graham, who was troubled and on suicide watch 30 days before his death. There was an altercation between the two of them which resulted in his death. Joseph was already given a life sentence, but he got 27 years on top of the previous life sentence. Sniping the number 6 spot is Keith Raniere. He founded a group called Nixium, which was first described as a self-growth program where members could get to different levels using multi-level marketing. The group became very popular, receiving recognition and praise after even some celebrities joined it. So it seemed legit. But the group was eventually exposed for being a sex cult that was recruiting women as slaves and then forcing them into trafficking. Victims from the group came forward with disturbing stories and evidence about their time spent within the group. One victim showed her scar from the branding that they had to get burned on their body, which was his initials. He was sentenced in 2020 to 120 years in prison for counts of racketeering, trafficking, and sexual exploitation. Despite being found guilty though, he remained innocent the entire time and called all of his victims liars. Halfway through at number 5, we have Trevon Boykin. The TCU football star lost his entire career in 2020 when he was sentenced to 3 years in prison. At just 26 years old, he was the quarterback of the Seattle Seahawks, but was charged with aggravated assault, causing serious bodily injury and tampering with a witness. He was accused by his girlfriend at the time, who accused him of breaking her her jaw during a domestic violent altercation. He pleaded guilty to those charges and also pleaded guilty to 2 misdemeanor theft charges. His defense attorney released a statement saying that he would not be treated any differently than anyone else in jail and that he takes full responsibility for his actions. He also said that he hopes his football career will be able to continue after he serves his sentence. Taking over the 3rd spot is Sam Hurd. It was in 2013 when the former FNL receiver was sentenced to 15 years in prison. He was sentenced to his role in starting a drug distribution scheme while playing for the Chicago Bears, so his downfall happened fast and he lost his entire career. He was just 28 years old when being sentenced, and he pleaded guilty to 1 count of trying to buy and distribute large amounts of drugs. The charge carried a minimum 10-year sentence and a maximum of life. Authorities at the time say that his NFL teammates and friends knew him as a hard-working wide receiver and married father, and would have never guessed that he was doing these secret deals on the side. In 2015, reports say that he was asking for a sentence to be shortened. After just 2 years of his sentencing, he claimed that he has been rehabilitated and deserves to have his sentence cut. Unfortunately, the judge denied his request. Coming in at number 2 is Kid Creole. He was once very respected in the hip-hop world, being an original member of Grandmaster Flash and Furious 5, but that all changed when he was arrested and charged for the murder of a 55-year-old homeless man named John Jolly. Reports say that the two of them got into an argument near his workplace at the time. While walking home, Kid got angry after he thought John was making sexual advances towards him, so he pulled out a weapon and stabbed him twice in the chest. Tourists called 911 and he was pronounced dead at Bellevue Hospital less than 1 hour later. The two men had no relations prior to this. That was allegedly their first time meeting each other, and things just got out of hand. The former musician confessed to the stabbing but said that he thought John was going to rob him. Video footage shows that after the altercation, John was still standing and able to walk around and drink beer. He was actually found by tourists a street over, and reports say that he had more than 1 altercation that night, so there is still a lot of controversy surrounding the case and what really happened. In the number 1 spot is Shmurda. The rapper, whose real name is Corey Miller, was accused of fatally shooting a young man named Steve Thomas at a nightclub back in 2002. He was convicted of 2nd-degree murder in 2009 and is serving a life sentence. However, there's a lot of controversy around his case because since his conviction, 2 key eyewitnesses have recanted their original testimony. Kim Kardashian, who has gotten involved in other legal cases to help the wrongfully convicted get out of prison, is advocating for Corey's release from prison. One key witness, Kenneth Jordan, came forward saying he was pressured from detectives to lie under oath or else he would face a 10-year sentence. He said, "I know the individual that I saw shoot the gun, and that was not Corey Miller." Kim Kardashian is said to be providing financial assistance to the Decarceration Collective and is trying to help him get out. As of February 2021, he's still behind bars and no recent updates have been given to the public. Starting off our list at number 10 is Massimo Giannulli, the designer, better known as Lori Loughlin's husband. The two of them were actually put behind bars in 2020 after getting caught for being involved in a college admissions scandal. They paid $500,000 in bribes to get their 2 daughters accepted early into the University of Southern California. They initially pleaded not guilty to the charges, but then later pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit fraud. Lori was sentenced to 2 months in prison and got released in December of 2020, while Massimo was sentenced to 5 months in prison, so he is still there and still has some time to go. Court documents showed his lawyers recently said that he was in quarantine for 56 days due to COVID-19 measures and concerns within the jail. His lawyers tried to get him released to serve the rest of his sentence at home, but he was denied. His projected release date is April 17th, 2021. Moving on to number 9 is Austin Jones. The former YouTube star was sentenced to jail at just 26 years old after he pleaded guilty to CP charges. He was sentenced in Chicago federal court to spend 10 years in prison for coercing girls to send explicit photos and videos to him. Prosecutors wanted an 11-year prison sentence, while the defense wanted the minimum available, which was 5 years. Court documents showed the prosecutor said he used his fame for power over some of his fans and would prey on them knowing that they would do these things things out of admiration for him. He was known for his YouTube videos, but also for his music. Some of his music videos gained millions of views, and he even went on tour for his music. But after pleading guilty, all of that was gone and his YouTube account was deleted. Moving on to number 8, we have Joe Exotic. He gained instant fame after his documentary aired on Netflix called Tiger King: Murder, Mayhem, and Madness. Go watch it if you haven't. Just do it. Commit to it. Watch it. The documentary focused around his life as the owner of a tiger zoo and also the rival he had with a woman named Carole Baskin. But by the end of the documentary, we learned that Joe was actually locked behind bars after he was found guilty for being involved in a murder for hire plot. He tried to hire someone to kill Carole Baskin, who was an animal rights activist, and was sentenced to 22 years in jail. Joe and his team thought he was going to get pardoned from the former president Donald Trump, but he was actually denied. His lawyers are now asking the judge to shorten his sentence, claiming that it was a close call. No updates have been given about that yet, so we will have to wait and see. Up next, number 7 is Bobby Shmurda. The rapper was arrested in 2014 for a drug gang conviction and was later sentenced in 2016. When he was arrested, investigators found 2 illegal weapons in his car and illegal amount of drugs. An indictment charged him and more than 15 defendants with a variety of crimes including murder, assault, and drug dealing. He ended up getting sentenced to 7 years in prison back in 2016, but was eligible for an early release based on the time that he had served pleading guilty and for good behavior in prison. A plea deal also allowed him to avoid going to trial on multiple counts, carrying penalties that could have put him behind bars for decades. He spent 4 years behind bars and he was actually just released less than 2 weeks ago, but is still on parole. So technically, he just got out. So he's not still in, but he's on parole. Moving on to number 6, we have Jared Fogle. You probably won't know his name just by hearing it, but if you have watched a Subway commercial, then you would recognize him right away. He was a spokesperson for the restaurant and starred in all of their commercials. He gained fame from this role as the Subway guy, even appearing in movies like Jack and Jill and Sharknado. But in 2015, his entire career ended after he was given a 15-year jail sentence in the Federal Correctional Institution. He was charged for distributing and receiving CP and also having inappropriate relations with someone underage. He didn't stand a chance in court because he actually pleaded guilty to all of the charges. It is safe to say either way that we will not be seeing much from him. Halfway through the list at number 5 is Tamor Trevon McIntyre. He found fame as a rapper known professionally as Tay K. After his song The Race reached a spot on the charts and was certified platinum by the RIAA in 2018, it looked like he was going to have a very long, successful career ahead of him. But just 1 year later, in 2019, his entire life changed and he was sentenced to 55 years in prison. He was sentenced for his part in the murder of a man during a 2016 home invasion robbery. The crime took place before he skyrocketed into fame, and before he knew it, he was charged with capital murder. He ended up pleading guilty and was sentenced to 30 years on one of the robbery counts and 13 years on his role in the aggravated robbery and murder. The sentences are being served concurrently, and he was ordered to pay a $21,000 fine as well. In spot number 4 is Suge Knight. The former rapper had the world in his hands when making music and being the CEO of Death Row Records. But as of 2018, his life is a lot different and he is locked behind bars. In 2018, he was sentenced to 28 years in jail for a crime that was committed in 2015. He pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter for running over a Compton businessman. He entered the plea in Los Angeles Superior Court and agreed to 28 years in prison. The plea deal came just days before the jury selection was scheduled to begin in the very long delayed case. He was charged with murder and hit and run after fleeing the scene after an altercation broke out outside of a burger stand. Reports say the whole thing started out as a fist fight that ended with him hitting the man with his pickup truck, which ended in death from the injuries. However, his attorney said he was acting in self-defense and was fleeing armed attackers and that he didn't hit him on purpose. Quite the mystery.
And number 3, we have Chris Brown. Chris Brown used to be an artist we all used to love and support. However, in 2009, when images hit tabloids showing how he treated Rihanna during an altercation the two had, we were left wondering what kind of person Chris Brown really is. Now, Chris was sentenced to 131 days in prison after being kicked out of his court-appointed rehab for violating his probation for physically harming Rihanna after he got into another altercation with a man outside of a hotel in Washington, D.C. back in in 2013. Now the star would then later be released in June of 2014 after serving 3 weeks of his term. However, in 2020, an unnamed woman would file to sue Chris Brown $20 million after accusing him of ravishment. While a lot of people have come to the star's side to claim that these claims are untrue, Chris does tend to have a history of violence that we have to take into consideration. At number 2, we have Lauryn Hill. Now Lauryn Hill was sentenced to 3 months in prison and an additional 3 months in home confinement for failing to pay taxes for her $1 million in earnings. During a statement, Lauryn would explain that she always meant to pay her taxes eventually. However, at the time she was unable to because she dropped out of the music business and she needed to be able to earn so she could pay her taxes so she could care for her family. After the star admitted she missed her deadline to pay taxes on purpose, feeling that she was resisting the system intentionally. The star would then be asked to pay $970,000 to satisfy the state and federal tax liabilities. Luckily, due to the star's good behavior behind the bars, her 1-year sentence would then be changed to 3 months in prison and 3 months under house arrest. At number 1, we have Abby Lee Miller. Now, we all know Dance Moms was a hectic, crazy show filled with drama. However, did you know Abby Lee Miller spent 8 months in prison for bankruptcy fraud? The 56-year-old company founder was in prison back in 2017 after being charged with 20 counts of fraud for hiding portions of her income from Dance Moms series. At the same time, the star was also being part of an ongoing bankruptcy case, which legally conflicted with the amount of income she made from the show. Abby would then be found guilty for hiding over $700,000 worth of income and would spend 8 months in prison. Addressing her time behind bars, the star has said that she doesn't think people had her back during this tough period in her life, and it really made her realize who her friends were. Now, celebrities may get lighter sentences or go to special jails. However, the sentences that most faced prove that no one's above the law, so be careful what you do.
Starting off our list at number 10 is Kodak Black. It has been some time since the rapper was making headlines for his music. He had a very successful career going for himself, but that all changed back in 2019 when he was sentenced to jail time. He pleaded guilty to weapon charges stemming from an arrest that happened earlier. The 22-year-old rapper at the time admitted that he falsified information on federal forms to buy 4 firearms from a Miami area gun shop on 2 separate occasions. He was able to buy 3 different weapons, and authorities said one of them was found at the scene of a March shooting in Pompano Beach. However, he was not charged in that specific case, but just for having the weapons illegally. The US District Judge could have sentenced him to a maximum of 10 years, but he was only sentenced to 46 months. He originally pleaded not guilty to the charges and was released on a $550,000 bond and house arrest, but then federal prosecutors appealed their decision and he was thrown in jail. Man, that would suck. Thinking you got out on house arrest and then they're like, changed our mind. Moving on to number 8 is Jonathan Paul Koppenhaver, better known as War Machine in the UFC. It seems like UFC fighters are pretty much born to fight, but sometimes they end up fighting outside of the octagon, and that is never a good situation. Not only is he banned from the UFC, but he's also behind bars. He has a record for getting into bar fights and has served time for those incidents, but one crime he committed was worse than anyone could have ever imagined. On August 8th, 2014, he broke into his ex-girlfriend's home and attacked her and her new boyfriend, and then eventually kicked him out of the house. After he was gone, he then attacked her, leaving her with broken bones, a ruptured liver, and broken teeth. She managed to escape while he was searching for a knife in the kitchen, and then she called the cops immediately. It was in 2017 that he was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole. He may get parole after he has served 36 years, which means that he'll be 71 by the time that he gets out of prison. If he gets parole.
At number 7, we have O.J. Simpson. Do you guys remember how outraged people were in O.J. Simpson's trial when Robert Kardashian said, "If the glove does not fit, we must acquit"? Well, knowing what we know today, O.J. was definitely guilty of the crimes he was accused of. Now, even though O.J. was not found guilty for the first trial, O.J. would later serve 9 years in prison following an armed robbery conviction in Las Vegas. After the actor was acquitted in California for the passing of his wife and her friend, and another trial held a decade later, O.J. OJ would be sentenced to prison for leading 5 men with weapons with 2 sports collectible dealers in a Las Vegas hotel. OJ would then later insist he was only trying to retrieve some of his personal belongings following his acquittal in a previous conviction. In 1977, OJ would finally be liable for the passing of his wife and her friend, and the courts would order him to pay his victim's family $33 million. OJ would later be released from prison in 2017 and resides in a gated community in Las Vegas. At number 6, we have Robert Downey Jr. Now, before Robert Downey Jr. became the actor we all know and love today, he battled some serious demons before becoming Iron Man. Back in 1999, Robert was sentenced to 3 years in prison after numerous incidents involving numerous substances, and for his failure to comply with the courts. Back in August of 2000, he was released early after spending about a year behind bars. After being released from prison, Robert did go back to his old ways for a bit. However, in 2005, the star would put the past behind him. He would get clean. He even started a family before becoming the amazing actor we know him as today. Now, Robert's story is definitely one a lot of celebrities can relate to because they've gone through similar situations. I'm just glad Robert got clean and he's doing well because he definitely deserves to be where he is today, and his story has definitely made other celebrities realize what they're going through and come clean as well. At number 5, we have Tim Allen. Now, before Tim Allen became everybody's favorite Santa Claus, he was actually arrested for controlled substance trafficking in 1978. At the time, Tim was only 25 years old and he pleaded guilty for trying to bring a pound of the substance in his luggage at an airport. Now, Tim has admitted that the stunt has landed him 2 years in jail, and it really screwed up his life. It wasn't easy adjusting to his life behind bars, and it took him over 8 months to finally realize what happened and to get used to living how he was living. When the star was finally able to get out of prison, he reflected on how grateful he was of his current life, and the actor also said that he loves his life, he's not any more mentally stable, and he has the same issues he had before. However, now he can't hide from them. Definitely when you're going through something, it's always better to talk about it rather than bottle it up and let the situation get worse. At number 4, we have Martha Stewart. So Martha Stewart's known for her crafty planning tips and her delicious recipes. However, her involvement in a 2001 insider trading scandal would ultimately lead to Martha's arrest and a 5-month prison sentence back in December of 2001. Now, the company ImClone got itself into a bit of a hot spot when it failed to get FDA approval for a product they were developing. The company's founders would then advise friends and families to sell their stocks so its value would dive. Martha managed to sell 4,000 shares and saved herself $45,000 in the process. However, things wouldn't go unnoticed, and the star would be later charged for security frauds, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy. Her case would finally go to trial in 2004, and luckily for the star, she wasn't actually convicted for her crimes. However, she did go down for conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and lying to investigators. Now, inside trading is when an individual buys and sells stocks they have in a company using information that's not available to the public. This business is illegal and it's a serious offense resulting in fines and jail time, so Martha should have just taken her losses and went on with her day.
Rolling into our number 4 spot is Bill Cosby. His jail sentencing was one of the biggest scandals in Hollywood history. He was one of their biggest actors, but then got accused of sexual misconduct and assault by over 50 different people. Allegations began to surface in 2014 from different women, and in 2018 he was found guilty and sentenced to 3 to 10 years in prison. Organizations cut ties with the actor, and media organizations pulled all reruns of The Cosby Show. He is currently serving a sentence, and he did an interview in 2019 about his experience in there. At the time, he referred to his jail cell as a penthouse and said he is very privileged there. He explained that he sets up group meetings each week with other inmates where he tries to help and educate them. As for the trials he went through to get there, he believes that they were not fair. He said, I quote, "It's all a setup, the whole jury thing. They were imposters." He's always claimed to be innocent throughout this whole thing, but he also admitted that he thinks he will be spending the 10 years in prison. In spot number 3 is R. Kelly. A lot of people didn't believe the R&B singer would ever be put behind bars, while others thought that he should have been there a long time ago. For the last 2 decades, he has faced allegations of abuse and sexual misconduct. Throughout the allegations, he was somehow still able to have a career, which a lot of people did not agree with. But in 2018, some very serious claims came out, and in 2019, he was officially charged. He was charged with 13 counts of aggravated criminal sexual abuse, and 2 separate federal indictments for trafficking. Old documentary footage actually surfaced and confirmed that he knew the girl's age and still proceeded to have a relationship with her. He is currently behind bars until his trial, which was first set for 2020, but got pushed back due to the coronavirus pandemic. As of right now, at the time of this recording, he will be going to trial in September for these charges. Taking over the number 2 spot is Ricardo Medina Jr. It was in 2017 when the world was shocked to hear that a Power Ranger star was being sent to prison. But the reasoning why was more shocking than anything. At just 38 years old, he pleaded guilty to stabbing his roommate to death with a sword 2 years prior. He was found guilty for voluntary manslaughter and was sentenced to 6 years in state prison. Doesn't sound like enough time, if you ask me, but here is what happened. Turns out he was originally charged with first-degree murder, which carries 26 years to life in prison, but after a trial and evidence shown in court, the charge was changed. Documents say he and his roommate were arguing over Ricardo's girlfriend and the fight became physical. The sword was allegedly used for self-defense and was the closest thing that he could grab at the time, and it was not a pre-planned crime. In our number 1 spot is Harvey Weinstein, another massive Hollywood scandal that was heavily documented. People were anxiously waiting for him to get sentenced and put behind bars, but his case lasted a few years before he was finally convicted. Harassment allegations surfaced in 2017 when the New York Times published a story detailing the allegations against him. Some allegations came from some of his own employees, while others came from actresses he worked with like Rose McGowan and Ashley Judd. The case lasted from 2017 to 2020, but he was eventually sentenced to 23 years in prison after being found guilty. He was last seen at the end of 2020 in December in a video hearing he had where his team asked the judge for him to be extradited due to health concerns and the coronavirus. His hearing was postponed until April 2021, so it is coming up, and we'll just have to wait and see what happens with that.